The purpose of our self-inquiry is to find out what is real, what never disappears in our own experience. We know all things in this world keep changing. They have a birth, a period of life, and then death or their disappearance. The Sanskrit word for world is Jagat. Jagat is derived as Jayate Gacchati iti Jagat. That means that which keeps on moving, always on the move. It is never permanent. The word Ganga, standing for Ganges river, also means the same thing, which continuously flows. So a thing that continuously changes cannot be a real thing. A real thing has to be eternal, unchanging, and it cannot be finite. The purpose of our self-inquiry is to find out what is real, what never disappears. Therefore, our interest is what is that thing which does not disappear, continues to be present, even if I close my eyes or shut off my ears and so on. What is our interest here is not the evidence gathered through somebody else's word, but what doesn't disappear, even if we shut off our own direct sensory perception through the five sensory organs, or even through inference using the mind. Let us say Mr. John in New York had a comfortable meal and sleeps in his bed. And he dreams being Mr. Smith in London. The dream happens within the mind of John. And this mind has infinite possibilities to appear as different characters within the dream of John. So he can dream himself to be Smith, or an animal, or even a mountain, or some other person. So there are no restrictions at all. The dream can be anything. If he dreams as Smith, walking in London, Mr. Smith thinks that whatever he is seeing in his world is all external to him, and he is perceiving the things through his sensory systems and the mind. But we know that the dream world in which Mr. Smith is one of the characters exists within the mind of John. John's mind, which is one entity, divides itself into a multiplicity of various dream objects within Smith's world. It separates itself as a little fragment within that mind to become Mr. Smith and his mind. So all the dream objects which comprise Smith's world, Mr. Smith, and even Mr. Smith's mind, they are all arising within one single mind of John. They are all made up of one single substance, which is John's mind. So the reality is a single entity, John's mind, but Smith feels there is a multiplicity of objects. There is a difference between sentient and insentient objects, animate and inanimate things. And Smith thinks that he is a separate individual and there is a world external to him in which he is acting and functioning. Going by that analogy, then, can it be that the wakeful life that we are all experiencing be also a single substance, which is the reality, just like the dream world in which Smith was existing was not real, was not permanent? Can it be that the wakeful world of ours also an ephemeral, not permanent thing? So this is a possibility which needs to be further examined. When we experience an object, it is always through a medium. If I use my eyes are the medium or the instrument through which I observe the scenery in front of me, the sight in front of me. If I hear sounds, I hear them through the medium of ears, and so on. So whatever we experience through our direct perception is always done by the use of a medium. In general, all such experience which is obtained by us is an objective experience. In Sanskrit, the word used for that is anubhava. The scriptures distinguish a different type of experience, intuitive experience, where there is no medium at all present. It is immediated experience. One is called as objective experience or direct perception. This is pratyaksha anubhava. And the other is intuitive experience, immediated experience, or aparoksha anubhuti. So for the investigation of truth, we have to depend on intuitive experience, which is not mediated through any of the instruments. So what we have to go for in the realization or in experiencing the self is this anubhuti, intuitive experience. And we can always go to that by just pausing. Whatever we are doing, just pausing at that moment and say, am I aware? When you say you are aware of something, it automatically implies you are using a medium. So it is always a mediated experience through an instrument, a sensory organ or the mind. So when you just say, I'm aware, and you can't be aware of awareness. So to be aware or to be aware of being aware itself is the highest meditation. Change of consciousness into a multiplicity as a manifested world is called vivarta, a changeless change. It's an apparent change. That means it doesn't really change. When consciousness Brahman appears as the world, this is also an apparent change. The apparent change essentially comes in two forms. One, like that of a rope appearing as a snake, or the appearance of silver within an oyster shell, nacre. Then the other type of change is a lump of clay getting the shape or form of a pot or a tumbler or a vase and so on. So the first type is called as ephemeral change, or is like a dream. So these dream objects cannot be put into any use for transaction, for conducting any business. Whereas the other type of change, when clay takes the shape of a pot, you can use the pot for storing grain or carrying water or for any such other purpose. So the second type of change or changeless change is called as transactional change. You can utilize the change that happens for your transaction, interaction. It is called in Sanskrit vyavaharika. So the first one is pratibhashika and the second one vyavaharika. But basically both types of changes are illusions. In Sanskrit, it is called as mithya. Illusion means mistaking one for the other. If there is nothing and it is purely imagined, then that would be delusion, or a sort of hallucination. Whereas in illusion, there is something, but we have a mistaken vision of it. So these two together, whether it is ephemeral change or a transactional change, both come under mithya. Why does this change happen at all? That is because the infinite Brahman rises as a finite mind. Finite mind means it's a perturbation, a movement. In fact, consciousness in movement is mind, and mind, totally stable, itself is consciousness. There is no difference at all in the substance of both these things, mind and consciousness. So the mind, and subsequently aided by the sensory organs, which are a movement within consciousness itself, shows the single oneness of Brahman as the world of multiple objects. Here, as you can see, the beam of white light, when it passes through a glass prism, decomposes into 7 colors. Practically, there is no change in the light at all, except for the separation in the frequencies. Similarly, the one consciousness existence, infiniteness that we have here when viewed through mind and the sense organs, becomes the world. If you visited a bookstore and you pick up a novel from the shelf, the total novel is available right in front of you. But the mind can never take it, absorb it, grasp it in one gulp at once. So what it does is it brings in the time factor in order to read page by page. So mind introduces this time factor or the time dimension in order to grasp whatever is observed, perceived by through it. So the mind brings in the time dimension and the sensory organs bring in the space dimension, as we will illustrate in the next slide. Attributeless consciousness, which has no describable characteristics or qualities within it, when seen by the various sensory organs, they impose their own qualities or limitations onto the open Brahman or consciousness, infiniteness. And that interpreted signal goes to the mind, where the fragmented object gets a name. Then we understand what we have perceived as a group of mountain ranges and some trees and so on. So in the open world that we actually see, it's all only Brahman, attributeless, limitless, absolutely open, whatever that is. And this, going through the senses and the mind, our detection apparatus, gets a name and form. To illustrate it in a different way, how the changeless change happens. Imagine a totally homogeneous substance getting into the shapes of some waves or getting some surface ripples. Has anything changed in the substance by taking the shape of the ripples? Nothing has changed actually. But our perceptory system can only identify only the anomalies standing out against the background. Just like you can read the letters which stand out in a different color than the background color of the paper. If the letters are printed in the same color as the white sheet on which they are printed, you can't read them at all. You can't see them at all. Likewise, in this Brahman also, whatever little modifications or those anomalies happen, we perceive only the anomalies. And we think these anomalies are separate, independent objects, unconnected with anything and having no link at all to the substratum Brahman. So the appearances can have all sorts of complicated shapes, but the substance is the same, and the substance again collapses back into its original shape. or in original state or nature. So without undergoing any change, we apparently see a multiplicity of substances or the multiplicity of objects, and that comprises our world. If we look at ourselves as a finite observer, a finite knower, within this world, we think we have been born or we are created within a pre-existing world. We are a finite observer and we see things external to us. Whereas, as the knower, if we place ourselves on this side of the projection, we are Brahman. So it becomes creation-based perception if we place ourselves as a finite observer within this projected world. Whereas if we are on the other side and realize that our own perception is bringing about this whole world, that is perception-based creation, or that is the Drishti Srushti Vada, the doctrine of perception-based creation, compared to the doctrine of creation-based perception or Srushti Drishti Vada. In order to make things easy, let us imagine that we place a sheet of paper here with a small hole, say a 1-inch diameter hole, and let us imagine here a huge source of illumination, light. So here we have open total light on this side of the sheet, and on the other side of the sheet only a beam of light passing. This side we have all finite objects and multiples of them. And on the other side, we have only one attributeless entity. So this little aperture is a doorway for the change happening. So this I consciousness, which is the finite entity here as the observer, when it inquires and investigates the truth using the mind as a tool, can carry only up to that doorway until that portal. Beyond that portal, the mind doesn't have any existence at all. So the mind can take us up to this doorway, like a moth which, attracted by the flame, goes up to the flame, and it can never enjoy or experience or realize the taste of the flame. It gets burnt away. Similarly, our mind also, beyond that gate of aperture, it dissolves itself into the totality of Brahma. Just like we mistakenly identify a snake in a rope, the world is misidentified by us as constituting multiple objects, even though it is consciousness only. We get two important or baffling questions. when we talk of this Brahman appearing as a manifested manifold. Why is there this evil? Why is this projection? Look to contain something bad, something undesirable, unwanted. Well, the answer is something like this. The people who design rockets, they build a self-destruction chip into the rocket. If something goes wrong, doesn't function as desired, you would like to destroy it. So a self-destruction mechanism is built into the system. Similarly, when Brahman, in order to experience things as a doer and also as an enjoyer of the results of the actions, there is a chance that this segmented mind or the finite mind to be lost forever in these enjoyments of pleasures and whatever happens. So how does a mechanism get installed to remind that mind, which is continuously in movement and continuously in action and enjoyment, to retrace and come back to its natural state of restfulness? It can only be done if some mechanisms are built to impede its activity. So these evils, whatever undesirable things, they're all designed in the system so that this separated, fragmented mind is not last forever. So what is after all an evil thing? What is after all a bad thing? It is something which is very inconvenient, which is uncomfortable, which is not wanted by this separate self. So this separate self resists these impediments. So this resistance makes it stop and think. And this process makes it to retrace its steps and come back into its original, natural state of being Brahman. Then the second question, which is interesting, is how is it that we find a perfect order, a scientific or almost mathematical precision of things, predictable cyclicities like a seed growing into a particular plant, or seasons following regularly in that particular fashion? So how does this order and system come into creation? We have indications of answers for this in Bhagavad Gita and also to a large extent in Yoga Vasishtha. In fact, Yoga Vasishtha explains many of these phenomena very well. This first, I thought, which separates from that infiniteness as a vibration, while projecting this world, also thinks of the various mechanisms or the physics and chemistry of it, how it should work and function. So the very first thought of creation happening will also have a module of the way the creation has to happen. Then we shall close this investigation of the self with one more analogy. If you are watching a movie on the computer screen or on the TV screen, you can say you are watching a movie, or you can say you are observing a particular character or a landscape present in the movie, or you can say, I'm just seeing the screen. Irrespective of whatever the viewpoint is, you are always seeing the screen only. Whether you say it's a landscape, whether you say it is the movie, or whether you say it is just the screen, all the time you are watching the screen only. So irrespective of whatever may be your viewpoint, you are always in Brahman, as Brahman, and you are nothing but the Brahman.